Okay, Martin, ready to start?
I'm ready.
Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, and thank you all for joining us. Those of you who don't know me, my name is Fahima Garzon, Marketing and Events Manager at the Greater Miami and the Beaches Hotel Association. We hope you guys are all staying safe and staying indoors. Special thank you to our GMBHA member, Renata, Associate Director with Sparkloft, for her assistance in organizing this webinar for us. We would also like to welcome our speaker, Martin Stoll, from the founder and CEO of Sparkloft Media. Just to give you a little brief intro about Martin. Martin is the founder and CEO of Sparkloft Media. Sparkloft Media is a creative agency that is focused in making sure its clients stay relevant in a social-first world. Before starting Sparkloft Media, Martin worked for Lufthansa German Airlines in various sales and marketing positions, including marketing director for Latin America when he was based in Miami Beach. He has extensive experience in travel distribution, e-commerce, and strategic partnerships. So Martin will take us through the sentiment data and offer some best practices on using social media during this crisis when preparing for the recovery phase. Thank you, Martin, for being here and presenting to our members. We really appreciate it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. As you mentioned, especially as I lived in Miami Beach, this part of the country is very dear to my heart. So I hope that the presentation today will be helpful for everybody to get through this crisis and out of it. So what I want to talk about today is understanding the mindset of the post-crisis consumer. I think we see two crises sort of, merging from one to the other, from the COVID-19 crisis to the economic crisis. And probably everybody will agree that each one of us has been very affected by probably both crises, and our minds have changed. The world, the way we see the world has changed. So I want to share with you some data on how we can actually pinpoint how consumer mindset is changing, and then give you hopefully some very tactical recommendations on what you can do to get out of this crisis faster.
Mark, excuse me,
yeah.
Let me just interrupt you just for a few seconds, just some housekeeping information. Martin is gonna go over the presentation, but you guys can ask questions on the question and answer section on the bottom part of the link, and we're gonna answer them at the end.
Perfect, yeah, and we will send out the slides afterward, as well as a recording of the presentation in case you want to share it with somebody else. But yeah, thanks for the reminder, Renata. The Q&A button in the app is the easiest way sort of to ask questions, and we'll get through all of them at the end of the presentation. So what to expect? I want to talk about how the mindset of the consumer is shifting, what people are thinking now in this moment of crisis, what it means for your marketing efforts, your sales efforts, how you should shift them. And then most importantly, talk about stuff that you can do today. So there's no reason to wait until we are in the next phase of the crisis. There is a lot of stuff how you can prepare and get ready to market to those consumers. And then we want to share also tips and tricks on how to be more efficient. My hope is to get through this presentation in less than 25 minutes. And as Renata mentioned, we'll then have time for questions and answers. One quick slide about Sparkloft. As you might not have heard about us, although we have a presence in Miami. We are a social-first creative agency. Most of our clients are in travel and tourism. We work with some national tourist offices like Brand USA, state tourism offices, and we also work with a number of hotel clients and have over the years, like Marriott, Hilton, Kimpton, One and Only Resorts, or Atlantis in the Bahamas. The world is more and more moving towards social media, and that's the lens through which we look at the world. While we mostly work in social media, we also do other digital marketing as well. But for this presentation, as you will see, has a strong social media lens. So let's go into it. So here is just a snapshot, what the world we live in looks like. So we picked a couple of tweets to illustrate what consumers are thinking. So and these are tweets from the last 4 weeks. So there's people talking about the confusion that erupted when there were flight cancellations and border crossings. There's people talking about how bummed out they are that their trips are canceled, for example, to Miami. There's people talking about summer travel and maybe doing road trips or staycations. There's also chatter about people saying, we can't travel at the moment, but once it's over, we're going to travel like never before. And there is conversations in the industry as a whole, the tourism industry, especially the hospitality industry, of the huge impact this crisis has on everybody in the industry and what needs to be done to save the industry. For this presentation, as we know, there's a lot of hotels on it. We pulled some additional data about hospitality and hotels. And one of the things that is interesting to see play out at the moment, and you are much closer to this than we are, discussion around the role that hotels can play in the recovery efforts, whether they are housing healthcare workers or can be a place to be used for hospital overflow and so on, which has implications on how hotels are seen in the hotel product as a whole. So a lot of the social media data is out there, and actually what I want to share with you, the foundation of the data is a process that we use where we have a tool that sucks in millions, sometimes billions of tweets, Facebook posts, TripAdvisor reviews, Yelp reviews, blog posts, and so on, applies a machine learning algorithm, and then clusters the data. And so you see here some examples, and we're going to go into some of them in more detail, but you can see what's the volume of conversation around a specific topic like coronavirus or the economic crisis or spring break. You can see what people are talking about, where they're talking, what the gender is, and so on. And at Sparkloft Media, we use that data to just get a better understanding of what consumers are thinking about and what marketing messages probably resonate with them the best at any given moment. Because as you will see, what consumers are thinking is shifting significantly. Here's an example. I mentioned the machine learning algorithm, which is key to this because there is millions of posts a day that get analyzed. So the tool, which was built by very smart guys at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, basically can take any public social media post and then analyze it and with a high accuracy, categorize them as negative, neutral, or positive. So you see here 3 examples. And you can also see on the right side for a topic, measure the volume of conversations. This is just sort of some high level stuff of what the tool allows you to do. So we've been using this kind of sentiment reporting for the last 5 years. And in regards to COVID-19, we've been doing reporting around it since January because we have a cruise client in Asia and they were hit first. So we've looked at a lot of data around this, and some of it we'll share today. And while we don't go into the data too much because we don't have the time for it, we mostly wanted to focus on the recommendations from it. All the insights in this presentations are all tied back to the data. What we do at Sparkloft is we do a weekly report that rolls over on every 4 weeks. So 1 week we have travel and hospitality. I will share some of the insights from that came out last week. This week we are focusing on consumer behavior. I'll have some slides about that as well. Next week we'll do updates on COVID-19, and then the week after, the state of the economy. You can find the reports on our website. Some of them we sell for a nominal fee, and then you can also sign up for free reporting there as well. So let's look at the data, a couple of slides. So this chart shows you the global conversations related to the coronavirus, where anybody was using a keyword related to the coronavirus in English. So we just focus on English. We leave out any of the Chinese social sites or language like Portuguese, Spanish, and so on. But for this conversation, the English conversations are anyway the most relevant one. And what you see is the huge spike in conversations up to a point where there were over 35 million posts a day related to the Corona crisis. And you see the different phases that we can identify looking at the sentiment data and analyzing what people are talking about. So the first phase was denial, then came an unease phase after the CDC announced that this was also going to affect the United States. The panic when all the flights were canceled and the travel bans came, and then the quarantine phase where everybody had to stay at home. I give you 4 quick examples just to remind ourselves, because while it seems a long time ago, but actually this was less than 6 weeks ago. The first phase, I think everybody was in the United States was sort of aware, obviously, of Corona crisis, but really not sure how it would affect the United States. We as travel marketers were very busy talking about spring break, talking about summer travel, how are we market to those people. Then came the next phase where a lot of events were canceled. South by Southwest was canceled. A lot of corporate events and corporate travel were starting to get restricted, and it got suddenly a lot more real. But even smart people like Elon Musk were saying, the Corona panic is dumb. And then things happened very quickly. I think the closing of the borders and travel to Europe being interrupted for at least 30 days, the NBA season being suspended, were all things that none of us could imagine before. And there was a short time where travel marketers were thinking about, okay, if we can't market internationally, then at least market to drive markets and locals, but that lasted only a couple of days. And then we were in the quarantine phase where everybody sits at home, is bored, does funny games like having a hand puppet, eating cars. And now we all sit here and wait and plan recovery campaigns and hope that soon we can start marketing again. We can see in the data already what phases are coming next. The frustration phase is one that we're probably in right at the moment. When we look at the data, we could start seeing that bubbling up 2 weeks ago, where people are just sort of done with the sitting at home and also getting more and more frustrated with the economic impact this is having. I think all of us feel this, but you can also see it in the social data. And then the next phase, and again, this is one that you see play out a little bit on the street, and it's not clear how much of it is sort of just, politically motivated and how much of it is people's feelings, is the division phase, where there will people saying, enough with this, let's go back to our normal lives, and others saying, no, it's still too dangerous. And for marketers, and I'll come back to this in a little bit, this has huge implications because as an organization that markets, you will be caught in the middle of this, and you have to think about how you're going to react to this. So this slide we pulled specifically for all the hospitality businesses in the audience. So we looked at conversations related to hospitality and hospitality related keywords, and we compared it year over year, or here you see the volume of conversation from January of 2019. And when you look at the very end, you see this huge drop off. And when you just zoom in and you look at the time from March 1 to April 15th, conversations on social media around hospitality, hotel, motel, resort, stuff like that have decreased by 42%. It's on the one side not surprising because people think about travel a lot less than they did a year ago. And at the same time, it's very concerning because if you are not being talked about, you're not being considered. So I think anybody in the travel industry, in the hotel industry, has to think about how do we get back to people talking about the vacations they take, the hotel stays they're planning, and so on. We also looked at keywords related to travel and compared it year over year. Again, this is the time frame from March 1 to mid of April. And you see on the left side the keywords for last year, and there were conversations about flying, flights, staying, state, the experience, the service, airports, breakfast, and so on. You look at the keywords for this year, and again, the size of the keyword shows you what are people talking about most, and you see stuff like closed, refund, insurance, people, money, refundable. Hotel is a big keyword, but when we dive deeper, hotel and flight are mostly related to people talking about canceling stuff. You see keywords like camping and cabin that are bubbling up, which again, if you are a hotel operator, is concerning because those are people talking about what kind of trips they are planning to take, and camping and staying in a cabin, are trending up. People are talking about it more as they plan their vacations. So I mentioned that we do a weekly report, and one of them that we came out with this week analyzed more how consumer mindset has shifted, in particular if there's a new type of consumer. How has the crisis changed what people think, and what kind of marketing messages are they looking for? So just to go back and reiterate or remind ourselves sort of why the mindset has changed, and we are all in this. We're not just marketers, we're all consumers, and people are scared, they're frustrated, they face economic uncertainty. And over the last 6 weeks, we've learned a lot of new behaviors that have just accelerated some of the stuff that was happening before, but some of it is completely new. So your favorite restaurant that so far you had to go to eat at probably is delivering food now at home. You don't have to go to the restaurant anymore. We have gotten used to buying not just grocery, but basically everything online. There's a huge shift in the live event space because it doesn't look like anytime soon we're going to be able to go back to concerts or art galleries or sporting events. We are getting used to watching those streamed live, which opens up a lot of interesting opportunities from a social perspective. I can sit on the couch and be on an app or on Twitter and watch the same game as my friends are and talk to them. So there's new habits that are forming there, and we've all hopefully gotten pretty used working, not only working at home, but also working out at home instead of going to the gym. When you look at the categories that are growing the fastest, it is exercise equipment is one of them. So for the travel industry, particularly, what this means downstream is, I think there's a lot of businesses who will look at this and saying, do we really have to take everybody's trip? This Zoom call thing is actually working pretty well. The conventions and meeting space will be disrupted for the foreseeable future. But we also looked at the leisure side. And one of the things that we are seeing, which is a threat to the travel industry, is that family vacation traditions are being unlearned. So a lot of families have a tradition of saying, every summer we go to the beach, or every summer we take a road trip, or every year we go to Disney or something like this. This might not happen this year, and people will form new traditions. And what if the tradition does not include a joint trip? So it's upon us marketers to really make sure that we remind people of the benefits of those traditions and traveling together. So keep this in mind as I show you what consumers are thinking. So in the social data, specifically for the consumer in the current COVID-19 crisis, we were able to identify 3 distinct consumer behaviors. There's the action-oriented consumer, the curator, and the escapist. So let's look at the 3 in a little bit more detail. So the action-oriented consumer is the consumer who's really interested in the fight against the coronavirus, takes a huge interest in that, retweets messages, uses the hashtags like flatten the curve and so on, has an interest in education. These consumers want brands to show what they are doing. So here's an example of what Airbnb was doing, talking about how they are opening places for COVID-19 responders. This type of content plays really, really well with that audience. So even if you're not Airbnb, but you're a small property or small business, being able to talk about what you are doing to make sure your staff is supported and is safe, or your future guests are safe, consumers really looking for that kind of content. The curator is a consumer who uses the time of the quarantine and the stay-at-home orders to better themselves. So those are the people who sign up for online yoga classes. They might print out instructions how to make face masks. An example of a brand leveraging that and talking to those consumers is Starbucks, who are posting content about how to make better coffee at home to make sure that the brand stays top of mind. In our analysis, the consumer is also the curator is also the consumer group that is most likely to travel first after the corona crisis is over. So this is an important one to talk to. And then the third group is the escapist. So the escapist is a consumer who is maybe a little bit overwhelmed by all the news around the corona crisis and is really using social media and the internet to get away from it all. So those are consumers who want to be distracted, who are looking for light content. Here's an example of what the Harry Potter franchise is doing in just giving people fun ideas on how to get cozy when you read your favorite Harry Potter book and so on. These people are looking for distractions. So let's go into some examples of opportunities, what you can do as marketers with those three audiences and in general with your content. And as you think about the reopening to get ready and attracting those consumers. So keep in mind that, we want to make sure that, we make breaking the travel habit really as hard as possible and as heart-wrenching as possible. So we really want to keep people engaged, even if they can't travel at the moment. So one of the things we saw in our report that we produced last week, where we took a deeper dive into the hospitality industry, is that hotels at the moment are not seen as safe as other parts of the travel experience, particularly airlines. So the airlines have done a really good job of educating the public about the new standards for cleaning. Delta has done a great job. Southwest has done last week some very interesting things, but hotels lag in building the trust. I think they are now coming out and communicating more. Merit is doing some interesting things, but at the moment, you could look at hotels and restaurants sort of as the weakest link when it comes to traveling. So what you should consider doing now is, you will have to develop new procedures. I think any hotel and service business is well aware of that. I'm not telling you anything new, but what you can already think about now is it's not only about the new procedures and standards that you establish, but really actively communicating those. This is what consumers are looking for at the moment. So this includes updating visual assets and start as you roll those out, even if you're not open at the moment, talking to consumers about what they can expect. If you have not seen it, Singapore last week rolled out on a country level a new initiative called SG Clean, which is very, very interesting. If you're a hotel business and you have not looked at it, I highly recommend that you Google it and take a peek, where they list very specific standards and procedures that hotels and restaurants in Singapore have to follow, and then they get a certification. And I think it's just, as Asia is ahead of us, it's a good glimpse of the future that probably will come here to the United States. Another example, that you should consider is, the hospitality industry is all about being hospitable. It's in the name, and human connection is a big part of that. But the human connection in the future will look very different. I think, this photo here from hospital workers illustrates this very nicely. So these guys wanted to make sure that when people wake up from surgery and they're looking for a human to take care of them, and the human is, behind hospital gown, face masks. So they put photos of them, their gowns, to make it less scary. And I think that's sort of a good illustration of what the hospitality industry has to think about, how service will be delivered in the future when we are all more distant. So the action that you can take now is to already think about, if you work at a property where people wear name tags that say stuff like "my passion is horseback riding" or something, to introduce the human that works, the associate that works at a property. In the future, I might not even come close enough to a check-in desk to see that. So how do you tell that human story? Or if you are offering guests the opportunity to bypass the front desk and go straight to their hotel room, which we will see more of in the future, from a messaging perspective, to make sure that you explain to people that you're doing this to keep hotel guests and associates as safe as possible. So there is, from a service delivery perspective, you want to think about how you tweak your messaging around it, and you can already start thinking about that today. And one of the data points that we very clearly see when it comes to marketing is that a great audience to market to are past visitors. So we see this very clearly in our social media data, that travelers at the moment are cautious about traveling, but look at familiar destinations where they've been to before as lower risk, which makes sense because you might know the airport, or you might know the hotel that you're staying at, you might even know the people at the hotel. And at the same time, past destinations, when people go on vacation, they almost always have a good time. They have positive memories from their past vacation, and it reminds them sort of the normal world we used to live in. And so you can leverage those two aspects and really trying to market to people who have stayed with you before or visited you before. So what you should do is identify travelers through your CRM system, your email, on social media, and develop promotions specifically for return visitors, and pulling on those heartstrings and telling them, remember the last time you came and you had a drink at the pool, let's go back to those good times. We are not saying you should promote and market to them already now. The time is not there yet, but you can definitely already think about developing promotions for those audiences. So I want to close this out with some best practices that we are seeing of what you could be doing. So some of them we alluded to. We will go through different phases, and the different phases will require different messages. So, we see at the moment the frustration phase and probably the division phase next. And the division phase, just to spend, a couple of seconds on it, is going to be really tricky for marketers, where you will face the decision to open your business, or you will open your business, and there will be people who say, finally, what took you so long? Yes, we are ready for it. And when you do that, there will be other people who will say, this is irresponsible, it's not safe, you are endangering people, my family has somebody who's immunocompromised, or think about all the healthcare workers. And there is no way you're going to please everybody, but you already now can think about how you will try and navigate those tricky waters and have messages for that ready. So in those different phases, we also see different type of content playing very well. So here's an example. You look at Asia a lot, and the hotels in Asia who are just, because it hit earlier there, who are ahead of it. So Shangri-La hotels, we found some very good examples. So you see here staff supporting local policemen, but there are good examples in the US to tie back the messaging of support into ongoing content. So last week was Earth Day, and you see here a photo that the Venetian posted, where they normally dim down the lights in the hotel, but they left some lights on this year to spread them, to say the words love, and give a shout out to first responders. This content, this type of passionate communication is going over really, really well at the moment. I think we're all looking for sort of uplifting stories, and that they don't have to be super big stories. I think there's plenty of examples when you look at your local business and what staff is working on that you can find, and people love to see that kind of stuff. I think in the next phase, communicating safety and hygiene will be critical. And those are things, we've worked with a lot of clients in the hotel industry over the last 10 years. And some of the stuff that sort of we are talking about at the moment, I think, was unimaginable 2 to 3 months ago. So when you look at the photo here again from Shangri-La hotels, where you see the post where they explain the new procedures, and you see tables that are further apart, a pretty empty restaurant, you see people wearing face masks and using hand sanitizer, very different service delivery. But this is the type of stuff that people want to see. And you need to demonstrate to consumers that you understand their concerns, and you need to show it on your web, in social, in email marketing and stuff like that. You cannot be detailed enough and communicate enough how the processes that you apply are changing. This is the photo on the bottom is from a blog post that Alaska Airlines did that goes at great length in every detail to explain what they're doing. And this is the content people are really interested in at the moment. And we talked about visual aspects, and I think that's another area that you can already think about now. How will you show social distancing in your photos and videos? So if you have photos where there are bigger crowds, you're gonna swap those out. How do you demonstrate hygienic best practices for the front desk, housekeeping, if you're on attraction, ride cleaning, meal preparation, to make sure when you have photos of the kitchen, people are wearing gloves, people are wearing face masks and stuff like that. And you might also need different images to reflect different service offerings. In-room amenities might change. You might have fewer pillows on beds and stuff like that. Food delivery, room service will change. All those are things where you can already now think about creating those assets and putting them on your website, or having a section on your website that talks about how you will implement those new practices as you develop them. And then the last thought on this is how you stay on top of what consumers are thinking. So as a social media agency, we know how important community management is on your social channels, and it's now more important than ever. So the example here on the right is from the Four Seasons Hotel, sort of when people leave comments, to really go and engage with those people, because those are potential future guests, where if you are in those difficult times, connect with them while they're sitting at home, it's more likely that they will consider you for a trip when they can travel again. And at the same time, the information you can gather from the questions that people are asking is really critical. And don't look at just your own social channels. We also recommend looking at TripAdvisor forums, for example, where you can see people asking questions. So a question that we see a lot is people planning trips for different types of the year. This comes back to the traditions that I talked about. So we see questions like people saying, normally we go to this place in June or July. This year we will come in October. Does anybody have information about how it's different? What can we do? What's it like? Is it a good time to come? And you wanna use the signals that people post on social media to develop frequently asked questions and scripts for your social media team to answer those questions, to update your website content accordingly. This is all stuff that you can do now to make sure that your marketing message is what people are looking for. Want to close this out with a very tactical tip, so that not everybody might have seen. So this Instagram launched this 10 days ago, where they came out with new stickers and new features where basically businesses can now share gift cards, food orders, and fundraisers in Instagram stories. And especially sort of the gift card option, if you're a small business or restaurant, being able for people to support you even if they can't come and enjoy a meal at your place, but they can buy a gift card and help you with cash flow and all that stuff. So this is just one example. There is a ton of new features on all platforms that have been rolled out to support small businesses and support the restaurant and hospitality industry. Lots of new features that make hopefully life a little bit easier, that we highly recommend leveraging, because using those features doesn't cost anything. So with that, we'll close it out. As I mentioned, if you want more information on the platform updates or any of the other stuff, you can find it on our website at sparkloftmedia.com, or you can sign up for the weekly reports that we publish that have a lot more than what I could go through in the 20+ minutes that we had. And with that, we'll go to questions and answers.
Okay, the first two questions are kind of similar. So we know that it's not the right time to have sales offers or comeback promotions, but do you have any concrete recommendations of what content a small boutique hotel could be focusing on at this time without seeming aggressive or insensitive?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and we see that we get that question a lot from our clients. So I think what people are looking for is the human connection. So if you are a smaller property, to basically give people updates on what the situation is for your staff and for your team, but tying it back to saying, we are all assuming that's, I don't want you to talk about it, but assuming that you can say, we are sad that we can't serve any guests at the moment. We're all safe here. We are, looking forward for the situation to be improving so that we can all be traveling again, which is such an important part of our lifestyles. And here are some of the things that we're working on at the moment. So the stuff that we've seen is what we've done for clients is, for example, what has worked really, really well, but is a little bit higher production process is for the cruise line, for example, which obviously the ships are not sailing at the moment. We've done Instagram and Facebook Live with bartenders where they are mixing a cocktail, and we have done yoga classes and stuff like that. So granted, this is a bigger lift for a small property that might not be doable, but even saying, here's a recipe for a drink. And while I acknowledge that sort of a lot of brands are doing it, that doesn't mean that you should not also be doing it. Just telling sort of stories from about what is your staff up to and what can people expect when they come back. I think, you stay top of mind, you make the human connection, and you're not being overly salesy, would be my answer to that.
The next question is, if you think that it's going to be a trend about people going for staycations instead of traveling distances from home.
Yeah, So we have seen that in our social media data for sure, and there's other research done by US Travel Destinations International and so on that shows that people when they can travel again are more likely for sure to stay in the United States, but also road trips are going to be or anything we have to get on a plane is much more likely than distant travel. So if you think about Miami Beach and the product that you have to offer, I think an opportunity to see who are people who normally go to the Caribbean, for example, and can you capture some of that traffic? How do you have to position yourself? One of the things to be mindful of as you market is people seem a little bit hesitant about going to bigger cities. So you want to downplay the urban aspect of it, which I think for a Miami Beach is easier than for other destinations like Orlando and so on. But there's a lot of data that points towards people being more local. And how you define staycation, is this 30 miles, 50 miles, 100 miles? I think that remains to be seen, but shorter distance travel for sure as in the first phase as we come out of this.
Great. I have one more question here. So Martin, you already said that the reports are available on Sparkloft's website, but can this data be applied to other regions like Latin America or United Kingdom?
Yes, so we did, for this report, we didn't run it specifically for those two markets, but we have a lot of clients in both markets and who depend on more the long haul traveler and who are watching this very anxiously. So what we see is sort of how we look at this is a lot will depend on how air travel comes back. And it's just too early to say. I think we'll know more in like 2 weeks. So look at the UK, you look at sort of with Virgin Atlantic, sort of not sure what's going to happen there, if they get a bailout or how they will get a bailout. I think it's pretty clear that they will get a bailout. I don't think Virgin Atlantic is going away, but how that's going to, which role that will play, what's happening with Norwegian. So a lot of the airlines in really deep trouble at the moment and will need from the government. And that airlift and border openings will determine on how fast the international traffic will come back. It's the same in Latin America, and the two sides to it is we always look at what's the situation on the ground. So if you look at Brazil, for example, what's the situation in Brazil and how attractive is it or how easy is it for people from Brazil to come to the United States? And there, how the pandemic is managed locally will determine if people are allowed to travel. So it could be, for example, this is just hypothetically, I'm not saying I have any information about this, but it could be that, for example, the US say, or other countries say, we will have a quarantine. Anybody who comes from country XYZ needs to be 2 weeks in quarantine, which would put a huge damper on travel from that market. But we don't know how that's going to play out because nobody knows how fast borders will open again and what restrictions come from it. Overall, I think international travel, our take on it is will be limited for this summer season and will probably start coming back in the fall.
And the last question that we have, Martin, is if you're a small hotel, what will be the most effective social media strategy at this time if we're not usually very active in the space?
Okay. So it's a little bit hard sort of to say that in general, because I don't know what very active means. Our perspective on it obviously is very biased because we do a lot in social media, but I'll just tell you honestly what I think about it is I think there is no other platform or the space where I would put my marketing dollars is digital, because we can expect there be going to be a lot of ups and downs for weeks, if not months to come. And so when you look at the lead times or the commitment you have to do, for example, to a print publication where you might have an ad somewhere, but then the situation changes and you're not able to pull that ad. If you do digital marketing, whether it's social media or display or search, gives you much more flexibility. You can pull anything and shut it down from one day to the other. So that's where we are very bullish on digital marketing. Within digital, what I love about social media is how targeted you can be in your paid efforts. And if you don't do a lot in social media, I think that's one of the things where I would encourage you to look at if you haven't done a lot of paid social, because there's a lot less advertising at the moment. The cost to advertise on Facebook, for example, has come down 30 to 50%. And at the same time, you can be so targeted, unlike any other platform. So you can, choose not only by age and geography and education and household income, but you can also, just to give you one example, if you haven't thought about this before, target by political affiliation. And there is studies out there that say that for whatever reason, Republicans are 3 times as likely to start traveling and venturing out again than Democrats are. So in theory, you can run a campaign on Facebook specifically targeting people who Facebook has identified as leaning Republican, and see, comparing, then you do a second set and target Democrats or people who Facebook thinks lean Democratic, and compare the notes in terms of traffic to the website, or if you set up the funnel the right way, once you can start accepting bookings again, it's that converting more. And that's the stuff where we think, especially the Facebook ecosystem with Instagram and Facebook is unparalleled in terms of the options that you have as a marketer to reach very specific audiences. And as long as you have a message for that specific audience that is interesting, I think it can lead to great conversion. We call these sort of, if you don't do a lot of advertising, one last thought on it is, a lot of people think about, oh, we put something on our Facebook page and then we boost that post. And that's one of the things you can be doing. So then people who follow your page have a higher likelihood of seeing that. But you can also do something which we call dark posts, where you post something and show it to people who might not even in any way be associated with your Facebook page, for example, and might not know about you. And there's some very interesting opportunities there to reach audiences that you might not have considered before. What I said earlier, where I think you have to reconsider who your normal audience is. So you, as a hotel in Miami Beach, where I know you get a lot of visitors from overseas or Latin America during the summer, those people might not come this year. So you need to target an audience that normally wasn't our audience. It could be people who in the past have traveled to Italy in summer, but now they can't go to Italy. So you have to go after, there's an opportunity to get those people to come to Miami Beach this year. And you need to find those audiences, and you can very easily do that on social media. So those are my long thoughts on that.
Perfect. I think that's it in terms of questions. And I think we are running out of time. So yeah, you want to just close it out?
Sure. So from my side, I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, you can also email us. Happy to answer any more questions or send more information. I hope everybody is still staying safe at the moment, and let's hope passes quickly. I think a lot of optimism that we might get out of this faster than first feared. So let's be positive, use this as an opportunity, and find some new clients. I think that concludes it, right?
Yes. Thank you very much for everyone's participation, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Goodbye.